a pleasant day to everyone. Welcome to lesson 3.3. So, today class, we will be talking about performance management and appraisal. Basically, companies use performance appraisals to give employees big picture feedback on their work and to justify pay increases and bonuses as well as termination decisions. So, this can be conducted at any given time. But these tend to be annually or semi-annually or quarterly. For our learning outcomes, first we must define performance appraisal and understand its importance and how it works. Know the process of performance appraisal, differentiate performance appraisal from performance management, and elaborate techniques for appraising performance, and understand potential appraisal problems. Discuss the guidelines for an effective appraisal. So those are the 6 objectives we have today. So let us first define performance appraisal. What is performance appraisal nga ba? So performance appraisal refers to the evaluation of employees' current and or past performances relative to his or her performance standards. So it is also an evaluation of an employee's skills, achievements, and growth or lack thereof. Performance appraisal is also known as annual review or performance review or evaluation or employee appraisal. So hence, this term refers to the regular review of an employee's job performance and overall contribution to a company. So this is an example of an evaluation form of a faculty. So an effective appraisal also requires that the supervisor set performance standards, and it requires that employees receive the training, feedback, and incentives required to eliminate performance deficiency. So dapat we have performance standards and dapat employees will receive training, feedback, and incentives. So now let's take a look naman on its importance, how performance appraisal works. So ang performance appraisal, they are usually designed by human resources departments as a way for employees to develop in their careers. And also, it provides individuals with feedback on their job performance and ensures that employees are managing and meeting the goals expected of them, giving them guidance on how to reach them if they fall short. Because companies have a limited pool of funds, from which awards and incentives will be drawn, such as raises or bonuses. Ang performance appraisal, this will help us determine how to allocate these funds. So they provide a way for companies to determine which employees have contributed the most to the company's growth, so companies can reward their top performing employees accordingly. Moreover, performance appraisals also help employees and their managers create a plan for employee development. This is through additional training and increased responsibilities, as well as to identify ways these employees can improve and move forward in their career. And also, this will help keep everyone on the same page. And of course, to develop strong relationship between employees and managers and make annual reviews less stressful. So what is the process of performance appraisal? Ang effective appraisal daw begin before the actual appraisal does, with the manager defining the employee's job and performance criteria. So dapat ang performance criteria is defined. So what does defining the job means? When we say defining the job, it means making sure that you and your subordinates agree on his or her duties, and job standards, and on the appraisal methods that you will use. So ang performance appraisal, it usually involves 3 steps or 3 practices. First is setting work standards. Next is assessing actual performance, and providing the feedback. So these 3 is usually involving some rating form, Ang assessing the actual performance, you will use a rating form, and then in the providing the feedback to the employees, The aim of this is to help him or her eliminate performance deficiencies or to continue the performed nga above par level, no? So why do we evaluate or why do we appraise performance? First class is base pay, promotion, and retention decisions. So basihan daw siya aning tulo ang ato ang employees appraisal. Because most employers still base their pay, kini nga promotion and retention decisions to employees appraisal. Next is performance management. Ang appraisal, it plays a central role in the employer's performance management process. Ang performance management, it means continuously making sure that each employee and team's performance makes sense in terms of company's overall goals. Ayan, so dapat congruent or nakatugma ang each employee's performance sa atuang overall organizational goals. So, we will all be in the same page. Third class is correcting deficiencies and reinforce the things the subordinate does right. So, the appraisal lets you and the subordinate develop a plan, no, for correcting any deficiencies and also to reinforce the things that the subordinates does right. Moreover, facilitate career planning. Ang appraisal daw or appraising performance should facilitate career planning. It should provide an opportunity na ma-review ang employee's career plans in light of his or her exhibited strengths and weaknesses. And finally, to identify employees' training and development needs. So, the supervisors use appraisal to identify employees' training and development needs. The appraisal should enable the supervisor to identify if there is a performance gap between the employee's performance and his or her standards. And it should help identify the cause of any such gap and the remedial steps required. How do we patch the gap? No, this performance appraisal must answer, no, the development needs. So, ang performance appraisal is usually interchanged with performance management. Recognizing this, many employers today take a more continuous approach to performance appraisal cycle. For example, ang Toyota Motors o Kentucky, no, ang ilang Camry plant. Ang supervisors, they don't just sit with individuals to fill out forms and then appraise them. Instead, na ay mga teams of employees that monitor their own results. So, what is performance management nga ba? Ang performance management is a uniquely goal-oriented and continuous way to appraise and manage employees' performance. So, that's the difference between two. The main difference is that performance management is a uniquely goal-oriented, no? It is aligned with the organizational goal. Performance management means different things to different people. Some use performance management as just a new way of saying performance appraisal. Waga ma-interchange ra. Ang uban, some say nga, ang performance appraisal, it represents just the appraisal step. Ngadto sa ato ang 3-step goal setting, katong appraisal and feedback. The 3-step nga ato ang gihisgutan ganina. For others, they refer performance appraisal ngadto sa second, no, katong assessment stage. Ang performance management manggod, according to Gary Dessler in this lesson, we are assuming that ang performance management is a uniquely goal-oriented and a continuous way to appraise and manage employees' performance. So, in its sense, the three main things distinguishing performance management from the performance appraisal are these three. First is performance management never means just meeting with a subordinate once or twice a year. So, ang performance management, it's a continuous daily, no, or weekly interaction and feedback to ensure nga na ay continuous improvement. Second, ang performance management is always goal-directed. The continuing performance reviews always involve comparing the employees or team's performance against the goals that specifically stem from a link to the company's strategic goals. dapat na ay strategic congruence, no? Strategic congruence, yun yung central ng performance management sa goal. So when we say congruent, aligned, no? Dapat aligned siya with the organizational goals. So each employee's goals must be aligned with the departmental and company's goals. So third, ang performance management, it means continuously reevaluating if needed, no? Or modifying how the employee and team get their work done, depending on the issue. So this may mean additional training or changing work procedures or instituting new incentive plans, for instance. So that's the difference between performance appraisal versus performance management. So many employers have what they call performance management process, but in fact, still use traditional performance appraisal. Ang continuous feedback and the strategically related performance criteria are the two distinguishing characteristics of performance management. As one expert puts it, sabi ng isang expert, a system that involves employee evaluation once a year without any ongoing effort to provide feedback and coaching so that performance can be improved is not a true performance management system. Similarly, ang performance management system do not make explicit the employee contribution to the organizational goals are not true performance management systems. So, ang performance management system daw nga dili clear ang employee contribution sa organizational goals, dili gihapon siya matawag nga true performance management system by Anonymous. So, let's define the organizational goals and performance standards. So, sa 3-step process, ang first step is defining the employee's goals and performance standards. Most employees need and expect to know ahead of time on what basis their employer will appraise them. Syempre, para alam nila how will they meet this appraisal system, no? Paano nila mai-upgrade yung sarili nila para maging suitable sa ilahang goals. Ideally, ang each employee's goals should derive from and contribute to the company's overall aims. The manager's goal flow from the vice president, whose goal from the president, for instance. So, for us to define the goals and performance standard, first, the supervisor must decide what to measure. That appraisal form shows that what will be measured. So, dapat na ay appraisal form nga ilahang i-produce para makita noon say i-measure nila. They have to determine these criterias and what to measure. The instructor is well prepared for a class. For instance, instructor ang ato ang i-measure. Ang sa other firms pod, they use management by objectives approach. Thus, ang CEO may have a goal to double sales this year. So for teachers, tan-aw ng ilahang criteria, no? What is a well-prepared instructor? For CEOs, pwedeng possible nilang i-measure is their sales or ang ilahang performance. Based on that, ang vice president of sales must set o goals sa each person, no? Each person will have their own goal. To be discussed pod sa ilahang supervisor. Next class is in defining employees' goals and performance. Dapat ang ato ang goals nga iset must be SMART or specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So, example, 10% turnover goal, reasonable ba? So, specific siya kasi may percentage kang nilagay na goal. And then, measurable ba siya? Yes, because there is a percentage. Specific siya? Yes. Attainable, no? Is it reasonable over a specific period of time? So, one way to think of this is to remember the effective goals are SMART dapat. So, dapat also attainable. When we assign goals, dapat it must be challenging but doable goals. So, ang goals should not be impossible para hindi sila mawala ng gana. And time-bound, dapat na ay time na imuhang iset. Intahay 10% turnover. dapat dili na mo taas og 10% turnover in a specific quarter of the year or in a specific year. So, third is encourage participation. The evidence suggests that participatively set goals do not consistently result in higher performance than assigned goals, nor do assigned goals consistently result in a higher performance that participatively set one. So, wala gyapon yung study. It is only when the participatively set goals are more difficult or are set higher, no, than the assigned ones. But the participatively set goals produce higher performance because it tends to be easier to set higher standards when your employees participate in the process. Participation tends to facilitate standard setting and performance. So, dapat agreed both sa employer and the employee ang inyong goals nga giset. For them nga ma-achieve ni, no, for it to be challenging but doable ang imong mga goals. On the other hand, who should do appraising nga ba? Appraisals by the immediate supervisors are still the heart of most appraisal processes. First, ang immediate supervisor. He is the person responsible for a person's performance. So, getting a supervisor's appraisal is relatively straightforward and it makes sense, of course, kasi kita niya yung efforts mo. Siya yung directly na nag-handle sa'yo. So, the immediate supervisor is usually the best position to observe, no, and evaluate a person's or a subordinate's performance. So, the supervisor is also responsible for that person's performance, no, in terms of monitoring that person's performance. So, ang HR department, they serve as a policy making and advisory, no, department. So, they are the ones who make the policy. So, they advise. So, ila tan-awon if your standards are being met, what could be the system, no? The policy, what is the method. Ang human resource department, ang mubuhat ana nga role. So, generally, ang human resource managers, they provide the advice and the appraisal tool to use, but leave final decisions on procedures to operating division heads. So, ang division heads gihapon ang decide. They just only provide advisory role. They just advise. So, the human resource team should also be responsible for training supervisors to improve their appraisal skills, for monitoring the appraisal system effectiveness, and for ensuring that it complies with the equal employment opportunity laws. So, yet, although widely used, relying only on supervisor appraisals isn't always advisable. For example, an employee supervisor may not understand or appreciate how customers and colleagues set the employee's performance. Further, there is always some danger or bias for or against the employee if managers have several options. So, we may use different people to appraise para walay bias. Example is peer appraisal. Ang peer appraisal, naay research nga nag-indicate nga ang peer appraisal can be effective. It involves undergraduates nga study nga gi-place ang self-managing work groups. So, naamanggoy mga organizations nga ang ilahang supervisors, they are not directly seeing, no, the performance daily. Possible nga makit-an is like halimbawa ang national agencies, government agencies, dili kaayo makit-an, based lang sila sa reports. So, dakog tabang ang peer appraisal kay dili man ka daily makit-an. However, nindot nga gamiton is not only one, no, type of appraisal system or dili lang usa ang mo appraise sa usa ka individual, but you can use a lot, no, or many or several of these appraisal system or several of these nga mo appraise nimo. Another class is the rating committees. So, ang rating committees, it is usually composed of the employee's immediate supervisor and 3 or 4 other supervisors. So, naay rating committee, example ang imong direct, na pod kay mga supervisors ni siya, mga up or mas higher nimo, no? So I formerly worked sa usa ka organization nga they are utilizing a lot nga naay peer appraisal and then naapoy rating committees, no? So using multiple raters is advantageous. It can help cancel out problems such as bias on the part of individual raters. Third class is self-rating. Some employers obtain employees self-rating usually in conjunction with the supervisor's rating. The basic problem, of course, kapag self-rating is that employees usually rate themselves higher, no, sa ilahang sa uban or higher than the supervisor will rate them. So that's the bias pag self-rating. Another class is appraisal by subordinates. So many employers have subordinates rate their managers, usually not for pay purposes but for departmental assessment. And kapag of course kapag subordinates nimo or under nimo ang mo rate nimo, dapat na ay anonymity. So it will affect the feedback. So, syempre kapag kilala ka, no, dahil i-rate ka sa imong subordinates and then imo isuwat ang iyang pangan or i-indicate ang iyang pangan, syempre mahadlok siya mo storya o ganang dili or negative. So dili gihapon may effective ang feedback. So dapat na ay anonymity. So because anonymity will affect the feedback. Lastly, class is the 360-degree feedback. So the employer collects performance information all around an employee from his or her supervisors, subordinates, peers, and internal or external customers, generally for departmental rather than pay purposes. So 360 daghan kaayoy gikuhaan og information apil na ang external customers. So the usual process is to have the raters complete an online appraisal survey on the rating. Ang computerized system then is compiled. They compile all the feedback into individualized report para makita ng rates. So the person may then meet with his or her supervisor to develop a self-improvement plan. So ang results are mixed, may difference. Ang results sa 360-degree feedback, ang results are mixed. Participants seem to prefer this approach, but one study concluded that multi-source feedback led to generally small improvements in subsequent ratings by supervisors, peers, and subordinates. So sa study, gamay lang ang improvements. So improvement was most likely to occur when the feedback ang person receives indicated that change was necessary. So usually sa study, unless there is a feedback nga ang change is necessary, improvement ang person according sa study. And when the recipients believed that change was necessary and had a positive view of a change in the process. So those are the people whom the persons, no, nga pwede mo appraise. So unsa may itsura sa 360 feedback. Ayan. So ayan si 360 feedback. This is an example of a feedback form na 360 ang gamit online. Managers generally conduct the actual appraisal using a formal tool, no, or method like one or more of this described next. The two basic questions in designing the actual appraisal tool are what performance dimensions to measure and how to measure them. For example, in terms of what dimensions to measure, we might measure the employee's performance in terms of generic dimensions such as quality and timeliness, or with respect to achieving specific goals. In terms of how to measure it, you can use one or more various tools or methods, such as graphic rating scales or force distribution or grading on a curve. So we'll start with the most popular, ang graphic rating scales. So this is an example of a graphic rating scale method. Ang graphic rating scale, it is the simplest and most popular method for appraising performance. So ang graphic rating scale, It lists traits or performance dimensions. Example, ani nga slide, dimension nga in terms of communication or teamwork, and the range of performance values from below, expectations to role model or unsatisfactory to outstanding para sa each trait. So the supervisor rates each subordinate by circling or checking the score that best describes the subordinate's performance. For each trait, no, kada trait, the manager then totals the assigned ratings for the trait. So that is a graphic scale method. So, mo na siya ang next slide ang sumpay sa graphic rating scale method. Sumpay sa sample form. In some rating scales, no, they assess generic job dimensions such as communications, teamwork, yung know-how at saka quantity. Another option is to rate the employee's performance on the job's actual duties. For example, in this slide, part of an appraisal form for a pizza chef, this assesses the job's main specific duties, one of which is maintain adequate inventory of pizza dough. Here, you would assess how well the employee did in exercising each of these duties. Or you might rate how well naman the employees did with respect to achieving specific performance expectations or objectives. Although not in the figure, example, sell 600,000 pesos worth of products per year. This illustrates a performance expectations or expectation, no, or objective. Ang competency-based appraisal forms are another option. Here, you focus on the extent to which the employee exhibits the competencies needed to perform a specific job. Yung mga competencies, generally, yun yung mga skills and knowledge. So, in this slide, or to illustrate, one competency of a nurse supervisor ang titingnan natin. Dapat ang usa ka nurse supervisor should bring a culture that is open and receptive to improve clinical care. So, why appraise such competencies? Suppose these hospital's strategic goals include improving quality and patient care. If so, then focusing the nurse's supervisor's attention on improving his or her clinical care competencies, of course, it will better support the hospital's strategy, no, than appraising how he or she rates on duties, like supervise 1 dozen of nurses, no. So, dapat ang makitaan in this case how a person leads other or supervise other nurses in improving clinical care competencies. So, again, inline gihapon siya sa strategic goals ng organization. Next is ranking employees from best to worst on a trait or traits is another option. Since it is usually easier to distinguish between the worst and best employees, that is why we have an alternation ranking method. So, first, list all subordinates to be rated. So, dapat naka-list of their names. And then, cross out the names of any not known well enough to rank. So, di man kakaila sa tanan. So, possible mag-set ang organization, moingon ng organization. Okay, we will use the alternation ranking method. So, kintahay, ang inyong i-rank, ang inyong mga nailhan within your district only. So, maura na inyong i-rank kay possibly maura na inyong nailhan. And then, after obtaining a list of the known employees, on a form like that, in the slide, indicate the employees who is the highest on the performance dimension being measured, and one who is the lowest. So, choose the next highest and then the lowest, alternating between the highest and the lowest until all employees have been ranked. Kaya siya tinawag na alternation ranking method kasi highest una, and then ang pinaka-lowest ang imuhang isuwat. Next class is the paired comparison method. Sa paired comparison method, it will help us rank more precisely. For every trait, example, quality of work, quantity of work, So, you pair and compare every subordinate with every other subordinate. Suppose you have 5 employees to rate. In the paired comparison method, so you make a chart of all possible pairs of employees for each trait, no? Just like in the slide, then you will indicate an A mark or asterisk or plus for who is better employee of the pair. Next, add up the number of asterisks for each employee or the number of pila ka buok ang na ay asterisk. So, just like in this figure, Maria ranked highest, no? Because she has the most asterisk marks for the quality of work. Whereas si Art naman, he was ranked highest for creativity. Another class is the force distribution method. This method is similar to grading on a curve. So with this method, you place predetermined percentages of rates into several performance categories. So the proportion in each category need not to be symmetrical. So it's okay bisag dili symmetrical. So in this case, you put A minus, A or A plus pagka 10 to 20% ang guideline. So you create a guideline. So one survey found that 77% of the responding employers using this approach were at least somewhat satisfied with forced ranking, while 23% were dissatisfied. So the biggest complaints is that 44% said it damages morale because parang sa klase, no? So halimbawa, A+, no, ang range is 10 to 20%. So, whether 10% or 20% kintahay ang imuhang sales output or ang imuhang giset nga criteria para sa grades or guidelines para sa grade, A+ gihapon ang imuhang grade. So, 47% said it creates interdepartmental inequities. So, dili satisfied. Ang high-performing teams, no, intahay A+, no? Whether 10% or 20%, A+ gihapon. So, dili ganahan og ang uban. So, given this, to protect against unfairness and bias claims, ang managers should take different steps like appoint a review committee to review any employees' low ranking. And then you can train raters to be objective and consider using multiple raters in conjunction with the force distribution approach. And then remember that the distinguishing between top and bottom performance is usually not even the problem. The challenge is to differentiate meaningfully between the others, no, or the other employees. So dapat mas makita nato, mas importante nga makita nato or makita ng ilahang needs, training needs, ang ilahang performance. So, they themselves, they could be challenged with the grading methods. So, that is for the force distribution method. So, with the critical incident method, the supervisor keeps a log, no, of a positive and negative examples of a subordinate's work-related behavior. So, na I list. For instance, for every 6 months, the supervisor and subordinate will have to meet to discuss the latter's performance using the incidents examples. In compiling incidents, it is very useful because it will provide examples of a good and poor performance na iiwasan ng subordinate. Pwede rin itong gamitin ng supervisor to explain the person's rating. So, it makes the supervisor think about the subordinate's appraisal all during the year. So, the rating does not just reflect the employee's most recent performance. The list provides examples, no, of how the subordinate can eliminate deficiencies. Ang downside lang is that without some numerical rating, this method is not as useful for comparing employees or for salary decisions. So in any case, it is common to accumulate incidents to illustrate the reasons behind the employee's rating. So in this table, one of the assistant plant manager, ang continuing duties niya was to supervise procurement and to minimize inventory cost. So the critical incident logs show nga he or she let inventory storage cost nga mo rise of 15%. So this provides an example of what performance to improve. Okay. So next class are narrative forms. So all part of the written appraisal may be in narrative form. So, in this slide, it presents an example. Here, the person's supervisor assesses the employee's past performance and required areas of improvement. So, the supervisor's narrative assessment aids will help the employee understand where he or her performance was good or bad and how to improve that performance. So, that is a narrative form. Okay, so 7, a behaviorally anchored rating scale or BARS. Behaviorally anchored rating scale. This is an appraisal tool that anchors a numerical rating scale with specific illustrative examples of good or poor performance. So, anchored siya sa scale. Its proponents say it's better, it provides better or more equitable appraisals than other tools nga atong na-discuss. So, here the example is that sa automobile salesmanship skill, so per skill na atay rating, no? So kada rate na ay description. So this is the description in persuading prospective buyers to buy one of our vehicles. Use our vehicles benefits to encourage people to buy. Use salesmanship with the skills to overcome buyers' slated reasons not to buy. Adjust sales pitch to buyers' needs. So ang number 10, a prospect said she would buy only one of our luxury convertibles or would buy a competitor's car. When the finance firm rejected her application, the salesperson compared our lower priced car to competitors and convinced her to buy our lower priced model. So nag-suggest, no? That is for 10. Sa 1, ang performance ni sales person is this. The prospect said he didn't like the looks of our vehicle and the salesperson told him the style is the style and that he'd probably be happier with the competitor's vehicle. So wala na siya persuade sa usa ka sales agent. So that may be one of the behavior. So the person or the sales agent may be ranked 1 or 2. And then 10, pag nag-suggest pa siya, no, makulit si salesperson. So that is or that could be their rating sa BARS. As each rating or each numerical rating scale, it is anchored sa illustrative examples of good or poor performance. So, okay, so next is developing BARS. So in developing BARS, it usually requires 5 steps. The first step is writing critical incidents. Unsa maning critical incidents? So ask the job holder or the supervisors to write specific illustrations of effective and ineffective performance. So, unsa may mga illustrations of effective and ineffective performance? Example, sa salesperson ganina, niingon ang tao nga di na lang kumupalit ana, moingon na lang ba si salesperson nga okay, mas maayo ngadto na lang ka sa pikas mo palit, or mo suggest siya nga naami mas maayo nga ingon ani ang style tingali ganahan ka. So it is an example of an effective and ineffective performance. So these are what we call the critical incidents. Then after developing the critical illustration or the critical incidents, we develop performance dimensions. So dapat na dimensions. So unsa man ning dimensions? Mao ni siya ang groupings, no? Or mao ni siya ang example ang salesmanship skills, no? So ang imong gipang suwat nga ineffective and effective nga mga performance, have a group of people nga ilang i-group into 5 to 10 performance dimension. Kining imuhang nga mga ineffective and effective performance such as salesmanship skills, no? Like communication skills. So imo na siyang i-group unsa nga mga skills. And then i-reallocate ang incidents. To verify these groupings, have another team of people who also know the job no? Then reallocate the original critical incident. So they must reassign each incident to the cluster that they think it fits best. So kumbaga tan-awon nila if sakto bang usa ka ineffective and effective performance sa specific dimension or sa isang specific skills, under ba na siya nga skills. And then retain the critical incident if most of this second team assigns it to the same cluster as the first group. After the reallocating of incidents, Next is we scale the incidents. So the second group then rates the behavior nga gidescribe sa incident as to effective or ineffective. So it represents performance on the dimension. So imo na siyang i-scale from 1 to 10 ba na, no? So ang usually is 7 to 9 point scales ang usually or typically used. Then we develop a final instrument. Ayan. So that's the final step. We choose about 6 or 7 of the incidents as the dimensions behavioral anchors. So mo na siya. We develop the final instrument. So that is how we create bars. Next class, another technique in a performance appraisal, number 8. The mixed standard scales. Ang mixed standard scales, it is somewhat similar sa behaviorally anchored scales. However, sa mixed scales, generally, it only lists just a few, like 3. Example, tatlo lang. Tatlo lang ang standards mo. Halimbawa, sa for the quality of work nga dimension, ang highest nga scale na pwede nimong i-rate sa usa ka tawo and employee work is striking and its accuracy. Accurate jud ni siya kaayo. And there is never any evidence of carelessness in it. Pwedeng i-rate mo siya ng the accuracy of employee works is satisfactory lang or frequently there is careless errors, no? So i-rate mo siya 1, 2 or 3. So depende sa rating scale na i-assign. Next is the sa conscientiousness or sa kapaspason, no? Pwedeng highest nimong rating, quick and efficient, then paspas siya maka-proceed sa new task. Second level, usually paspas lang siya. Or third, hinayon jud ni siya nga employee, no? So next dimension, example nga dimension is the ability to get along with others. Pwedeng ang pinaka taas is the ability nga in good terms siya pirmi with everyone, no? Second is pwedeng occasionally na siya conflict, or third na siya tendency to get into unnecessary conflicts with other people. So that is for the mixed standard scales. So ang management by objective class, this refers to the comprehensive and formal organization-wide goal setting and appraisal program. So some employers use management by objectives or MBO as the primary appraisal method. So others use it to supplement a graphic rating or other appraisal method. You could engage in an informal MBO program with subordinates by jointly setting goals and periodically providing feedback. Here, goals cascade down by level and department from company-wide strategic goals to tactical or day-to-day goals. So, magbutang mo og goal, kintahay ang inyong target sales sa company as a whole is 100,000. So, per department, kini dapat na may tag 50,000. So, ingon aron. Mag-set mo ng goals and then you will periodically review these goals for appraising your performance. Next is the computerized and web-based performance appraisal. Employers increasingly use computerized or web-based performance appraisal systems. So, ang software generates written text to support each appraisal. So, most or such appraisals combine several appraisal methods such as a graphic rating anchored nga method and the critical incidents method. So, that is for the web-based performance appraisal. Lastly, ang electronic performance monitoring or EPM. Ang EPM, it is a system which uses computer technology para ma-allow ang managers to monitor their employees' computers. So, networking, no? So, they allow the managers to monitor the employees' rate, accuracy, and time spent working online. So, that is for the electronic performance monitoring. Are the techniques in appraising performance. So what are the possible problems that may arise while appraising performance, or what are the potential appraisal problems? First class is the unclear standards or unclear standards. For example, different supervisors might define good performance and fair performance differently. So same is true also with the traits such as the quality of work or creativity. They may also differ or define this differently. So the best way to fix this problem is to include phrases that define or illustrate each trait sa imuhang form. So the form must spell out what measures this role, or what below expectations mean, Or what is above expectation? So, unsay trait, unsay quality sa above expectation. So, this will help the results become more consistent and more easily explained sa imuhang appraisal. Next class is the halo effect. Ang halo effect, it is defined as the influence of a rater's general impression, no, sa ratings of specific rating quality. So, possible nga maapektuhan. For example, ang supervisor, which often rate unfriendly employees lower, no, on all traits rather than just on get along sa trait nga getting along with others. So, naapektuhan pod ang lain nga mga traits. So, being aware of this problem is a step towards avoiding it. So, naay halo effect na. Kag-expect na ka nga low ang iyahang performance ani nga trait, low pod sa lain ang imuhang rate niya. No? So, that is halo effect. Next class is the central tendency. Some supervisors stick to the middle when filling rating scale. So, for example, the rating scale ranges from 1 to 7. So, they tend to avoid the high, like 6 and 7, and lows like 1 and 2, and they rate most of their people between 3 and 5. So, that is central tendency. So, this means that rating employees are average. So, doing so distorts the evaluation. So, making them less useful for promotion, salary, or counseling purposes. So, ranking employees instead of using graphic rating scales can reduce this problem. So, pwede na to i-rank na lang ang mga employees. Since ranking means you can't rate them all average. Next class is the leniency or strictness. So, other supervisors tend to rate all their subordinates consistently, no? Pirmi na lang high. Kini siya, pirmi ni siya low. Kay nag-expect na lagi ka. So, the strictness or the leniency problem is especially sa severe siya with the graphic rating scales. So, ranking forces supervisors to distinguish between high and low performers. So, dapat naghihapon tayo ranking nga way of appraising, no? Kay para ato siyang ma-compare ang ato ang mga techniques. So, ma-avoid ang biases. There are other solutions also. One is for the employer to recommend that supervisors avoid giving all their employees high or low ratings. No? Second is to basically enforce a distribution that's saying 10% of the people should be rated excellent and 20% good. Same as sa VSU, dapat at least 60% of your students must pass. No? So, naanay expectation daan. Para ma-avoid ang leniency or strict, too lenient or too strict, no? The recency effect. Next is the recency effect. Kini, this means that letting what the employee has done recently blind you to what his or her performance has been over the year. So, the main solution is to accumulate critical incidents all year long. So, kung once a year lang ikaw mag-assess sa ilahang performance, usually ang hinumduman ra nimo ang recent nga mga nahitabo, no? That is recency effect. So, to avoid this, we can accumulate critical incidents all year long. Lastly is the bias, no? Or the biases. The number of things that can lead to bias during appraisal is limitless. So, daghay pwede maka-contribute sa pagka-bias nato. One study focused on the rater's personality, no? So, it will affect your rating, depende sa rater. Rater who scored higher on conscientiousness tended to give their peers lower rating. They were stricter, in other words, kung kini siya, taas ni siya sa conscientiousness, paspason, ang uban na ato na hinayon na nato ang ilaha. Kumbaga, compare ni mo tanan. So, pwedeng bias ka sa usa ka tao. Sa other studies po, performance appraisal ratings obtained for administrative purposes or para sa payment or raises or bonuses nga appraisal were nearly 1/3, no, than those obtained for research or employee development purposes. So usually These performance appraisal are used for payment and promotion. So, gamay lang for development. Another writer says, ang performance rating amplify the quality of the personal relationship between boss and employee. So, it amplify the relationship between the employee and the employer. So, good relationships tend to create good experiences. So, bad relationships creates bad ones. Unfortunately, ang personal characteristics such as your age, your race, your sex will also affect your rating. So, daghay possible nga causes ng biases. So, to avoid this, we must be aware nga there are possible reasons nga mabias ta. So, the bottom line is that the appraisal often says more about the appraiser than about the appraisee. So, this is a powerful reason for using multiple raters para ma-avoid ang biases. So, those are the potential appraisal problems in appraising our team. Okay, so if there are problems arising from performance appraisal, one of our concerns is how to perform performance appraisal which is effective. So the guidelines for an effective appraisal is the following. So first is know the performance appraisal problems. First, learn and understand the potential appraisal problems such as the central tendency, all those that we have discussed a while ago. Understanding this and anticipating these problems that may arise can help you avoid it. Next is use the right appraisal tool. So use the right tool or combination of these tools. Each has its own pros and cons. For example, the ranking method avoids central tendency but can cause bad feelings when employees' performances are in fact all high. In practice, employers choose an appraisal tool based on several criteria. So, accessibility and ease of use is probably first. That is why graphic rating scales are still so popular, even within computerized appraisal packages. So, next is keep a diary. So, keep a diary of employees' performance over the year. One study involved 112 first-line supervisors. The conclusion of this and similar studies is that compiling critical incidents as they occur reduces appraisal problems. So, keep a diary of critical incidents. Next is get agreement on a plan. So, the aim of the appraisal should be to improve unsatisfactory performance or to reinforce exemplary performance. So, the appraisals and product should therefore always be a plan for what the employees must do to improve their efforts. Lastly, fifth, make sure that every appraisal you give is fair. So, studies confirmed that in practice, some managers ignore accuracy and honesty in performance appraisals. Instead, they use the process for political purposes. So this is sadly, such as encouraging employees with whom they don't get along to leave the firm. So, morning lisod. So, they use the appraisal, performance appraisal as tool para paalisin yung mga taong hindi nila kasundo sa company. So, the employee standards should be clear. Employees should understand the basis on which you are going to appraise them para sila, they will also be motivated, And the appraisal should be objective, and fair. One study found out that a number of best practices such as having an appeal mechanism distinguishes fair appraisals. So, that's the guidelines for effective appraisal. So, do you have any questions? If none, thank you all for listening and have a great day. And God bless.